Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's web seminar, Product Quality Does Not Start at the Finish Line, Improve Test Strategy to Create Better Products, sponsored by QMetry. I'm your host from Techwell, Beth Romanek. Thanks for joining us. Before I hand it over to our speakers, let me explain this console. All three panels you see on your screen can be moved around and resized. At the bottom of your console, you should also see a widget toolbar. If you click the widget that looks like two pieces of paper in the middle, you can download a PDF of the speaker's slides today. If you have any technical issues, please let us know by typing in the questions and answers panel on the left. This is also how you can submit questions. We will have a Q&A at the end, so feel free to ask questions throughout the presentation and your speakers will address your questions at the end. Finally, for your best viewing experience, please close any unnecessary applications you have running in the background. We are recording this web seminar, and it will be made available to watch on demand later. Once the recording is ready, we'll send you an email with instructions about how you can watch the presentation. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to our first speaker, Harshal Vora.
Thank you, Beth. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. And thank you for joining to this presentation or webinar where we're talking about managing continuous testing right to deliver digital transformation. And to discuss this, I am joined by two esteemed guests, Patrick Van Dijk, who is the test tool manager and comes with a 25 plus years of experience managing test tooling as well as test data management at ABN AMRO Bank. He has worked as a test manager, he has worked as consultant, he has worked in different roles, and currently he is responsible for delivering continuous delivery and continuous testing as part of the DevOps initiatives that ABN AMRO Bank has taken on. And we also have Puneet Shukla, who is the country head and managing director at Infosys. He also comes with 20 plus years of experience delivering IT services and is very passionate about quality and digital transformation when it comes to delivering it for their enterprises. Welcome, Patrick. Welcome, Puneet. If you would like to anything, if I missed something.
No, you did a great job.
Looking forward to it.
All right, thanks. And just to give a brief intro, right, that we met about 3 years ago, and when we were targeting this whole digital transformation initiative, and I still remember Patrick starting out, Harshal, we need to replace our legacy ALM systems with some agile and DevOps oriented tools that can help us in achieving this whole continuous delivery initiative that the bank has started, right? And that's when we collaborated with Infosys and Puneet's team to organize a hackathon for ABN AMRO Bank, where we had about 350 plus team members across different geographies, trying to collaborate and integrate QMetry with their internal tools and different technologies. And that's where the whole journey of this continuous testing and my association with Patrick and Puneet started. And I'm glad to be part of that association. All right, so in today's webinar, right, we are going to talk about continuous testing, which is the answer to many of these problems, right, regarding the digital transformation. And in recent years, there is a marked shift from the traditional enterprise IT operating model to the lean IT, which is more agile and outcome oriented. And the main reason for the shift is the need for improved collaboration, faster release cycles, and also the deployment cycles, along with the adoption of agile methodologies. However, to be agile in practice, the enterprise needs to adopt new processes and new technologies that support the much needed agility. And this poses a challenge for organizations that have retained the same operating practices over decades, right? Using the same tools, same processes, same technologies, and the legacy infrastructure. And to overcome these challenges, the companies have adopted digital transformation. And the key initiative as part of this digital transformation is quality and filling the gaps that the market has come up with, right? To overcome the speed to market, the overcome the quality checks, and that's where the whole digital landscape comes into play, right? So now, Patrick, since you have been working on this digital initiatives and continuous testing initiatives, what are your views that how continuous testing has become a key enabler for digital transformation, and how is it relevant in today's banking organization?
Yeah, thank you, Harshal. Yeah, indeed. I can. I do not. How do you say that? Tell any secret that from the past, banks are considered, say, conservative in that sense in adopting, say, new technologies and be innovative. But ABN AMRO also saw that, say, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, that had to still be relevant on, say, the financial markets and also for our customers. We need to do something about our delivery of our products in a much smoother way and also a much faster way. So instead of having, say, waterfall, say, approaches, we also transformed our organization, or still busy with that, into agile and DevOps. And so we can deliver, say, new features to our customers much faster, because we are doing that now in sprints, and we also use, say, continuous testing in that as well. If you look at, say, continuous testing, that is a very broad, say, term in that sense. And what it actually means is that you want to be able to check everything as soon as possible in the life cycle of the application. What you have seen in the past, you start your development, you do your unit test, system test, and acceptance test, but now you want to do that shift left, but also in an automated way. Also, looking at, say, team autonomy. In the past, if you want to do, say, testing and continuous testing, some of, say, the processes and procedures around that were not, say, adapting to that, say, approach. So we also have done within ABN AMRO, say, a shift in that matter. So our procedures to make sure that we can do continuous testing without, say, having too much of manual interference were also in place. And of course, if you look at, say, moving away from, say, traditional platforms like the mainframe or on-premise, while moving to the cloud, it also gives you an opportunity and also the ability to do that continuous testing. One of the challenges with continuous testing is, of course, that you have to make sure that everything is up to par in sense of, okay, do we all agree on this process? So it also requires a shift in, say, mindset and behavior of the teams as well. So that is, in short, what I can elaborate on that.
Nice.
Maybe also nice to mention is, of course, we are still talking about, say, a sequential, say, process, where we have, say, the D and the T and the A and the P environment. But what we are looking at is more, say, a test environment or a development environment as a service where you can just do your testing based on your requirement. So you can also do parallel testing and do not have to wait for, say, functional testing has to be finished before you can do your performance test. Now you do it just in parallel with the same, say, code that you have just deployed or delivered.
Nice. And rightly summarized, right? It's all about people, process, and technology, and how you implement the different processes. And as you mentioned, right, implementing the parallel testing process rather than a sequential process. Now,
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. So, Puneet, yeah, you can
continue,
if you want to. Yeah. So, Puneet, like, this is based on your experience working with other institutions, other enterprises, right? At Infosys, you have delivered this whole continuous testing initiatives and digital transformation for a lot of your customers. What are your takes on this?
So thanks, Harshal, and I think, Patrick has brought in some very interesting points. But before that, to everybody who is there, I think, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, if people are joining from the Indian side or the rest of the world. What I see, Harshal, sometimes I feel very good now, because when I really used to do testing, it was required a lot more effort to convince people why this testing has to be done as early as possible. Now, in some cases, looking at the latest development, what I see, it is not something which we really need to push, because the way organizations are really transforming, if they do not plan this continuous testing, I think they will see the failures much more quickly. But in some cases, it might also hamper their velocity, and then they have to really get the anger of end users. So from that point of view, I feel maybe this is a good time when people can be much more convinced. This is not something which is no something to choose, but there's no option. They really need to go for the continuous testing. Now, what I have seen, most of the organizations which are large enterprises, and I'm really talking about large enterprises with very big user base, for them, this is very, very key. I have seen now several organizations within Europe, if they have not planned continuous testing well in their life cycle of development or delivering the features or business functionalities to the end users, they have not been that successful, or they were not able to deliver with the speed which they want to deliver. Wherein the organizations which have really planned it well, they were always having the benefit earlier, but they see much more efficient and faster delivery to the end users. And definitely, as we always agree, if you have a good test strategy and if you're doing it in the right way, it does bring you maybe a lot of, I call them, side effects. So delivering the product with the right quality, right speed is one part, which is the goal. But when you do it in a continuous way, you also see most of your cost is going down. You don't see, if there are challenges coming from different product suppliers where they are not able to cope up with their speed, you can mitigate a lot of it to that. And what I see with this whole continuous testing, there is also a different way where people used to look on this whole automation and other things in the past. That has completely changed. So to sum up, I think, wherever I see organizations are going through the continuous testing, they are making sure the testing tools, test processes are part of their pipelines. They are able to make the or respond to the business changes much more efficiently and quickly compared to the others.
Sure. No, very, very rightly said and very rightly summarized. And thanks again. And let's hear from our audience, right? Let's do a quick survey on what our audience has to say. So this is the question, audience, that what testing strategy is adopted by your teams, right? And we have three options right here. One is the SDLC testing, shift left testing, module or model-based testing. So as Puneet as well as Patrick were mentioning, right, the whole paradigm of this agile and DevOps has transpired into this new way of testing, which is whether it's your shift left testing model you talk about, or you are talk about the conventional SDLC software development lifecycle testing you have, and we definitely have this whole model-based testing paradigm coming in, right? I think we are getting mixed responses. We have still a lot of people are working off of 45. We see the 50% are saying they are still doing SDLC testing. And you're right, in large organizations, there can be multiple options. Some groups are working off SDLC, some are working shift left testing, and it's a very convoluted system when you have a large organization, right? And once I think we can go ahead and publish the survey results now. Yeah, and looks like the SDLC testing, the conventional way is still what people are talking about as well as adopted, and shift left testing is definitely gaining a lot of momentum, right? So now moving on, and that's the whole goal of this webinar, that we want to talk about this whole continuous testing, right? What are the different how continuous testing can be adopted, and what is the role of continuous testing when you are ensuring the speed to market as well as the right quality without compromising any kind of security, right? So Patrick, again coming back to you, right? As a leading bank of Europe, right? You have a lot of compliances to follow. You have a lot of security checks, right? And you have a vast array of applications. And one of the challenges you have is you have front end, back end, and you also mentioned mainframe systems. And each application has its own processes, its own tools, and its own technology, right? So in order to ensure the speed for go to market, how continuous testing is playing an important role without compromising this security or on quality?
Yeah, thanks, Harshal, for the question. Well, I think continuous testing will give us a better opportunity to make sure that we do not compromise on security and quality. As I mentioned just now, in the past we had, say, a lot of, say, manual processes and procedures in place. If we had to do, say, some code quality check that was done by a third party, and then it came back, and then we saw, okay, this code is not correct. So if we were audited, then we got say, a signal from, say, the Dutch National Bank or ECB or whatever, that we are not in control. So it gives us better, say, tools to be in control while doing, say, continuous testing. Of course, you have to automate that process. And what we have done within ABN AMRO, we call it, say, reference pipelines, which we built for each technology. So we have, I don't know out the top of my head, but probably some in 15 or something, where we cater the needs of the teams who are using that technology, like Java or BPM or mainframe. And we make sure that those controls are in the pipeline itself. So once you have delivered your code, you're checking your code, all these checks of software quality and security is automatically done. What we also do is make sure that in our workflow that we have, we integrate this also in, say, continuous testing. So once you have done your testing, everything is stored in, say, Jira. And if you talk about, say, test cases and test scenarios or test reports, we integrate, say, with QMetry, for instance. In the future, also maybe with Azure DevOps. And therefore, what we also found out is that looking at, say, our tools that we had, we knew that those tools were not, say, capable of cater that needs of, say, continuous testing, and also make sure that those security and quality checks could be done in a continuous way. So that's why we have, like you said in your intro, also replacement of HPALM. And we are also looking at replacements for other tools as well, which are far more better to be integrated in this continuous testing process. So automatically check also the quality of the test cases, the reports that they are delivered there where they should be. Check on the results, make sure that if it's passed, the pipeline will just continue. Of course, there will still be some manual, say, interference, and at the end, of course, you still have some manual testing, but that is, unavoidable, I think. But for, say, 90%, we want to make it as automated as possible, and continuous testing is actually a driver for us to automate that process of security and quality as well.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. There is always going to be that manual intervention at the last. No, Puneet, go ahead.
Correct. And Harshal, if I just may add, what I also see with this whole innovation on the tools, if I go back, let's say 15, 17 years, if you see, the players on the tool side were very, very limited. Now we see, players like QMetry, but some of the other players which Patrick just mentioned. I think they are really innovating on the tooling side, which is actually a kind of blessing in the tester's life, because then lot of signals can come much more early in the process. So I see maybe that's also a very good part, where maybe these things are helping us to deliver much more better quality. And some of the things, maybe you don't need to be explicit, they are just coming as an implicit outcome of this tool innovation, which companies like QMetry, but some of the others which are doing. So that's really really handy when we see this continuous testing coming in actually.
No, the great point. Yeah, you're right. This with the newer technologies with AI and machine learning, right? Uh, all those quality gates and checks have been implemented already in the process or the tool, rather than you defining a particular process when you want continuous testing. Now, before we go into talk about different challenges and how Patrick and Puneet enabled Uh, their organization to overcome that challenges, right? Let's look at what our audience has to say as part of the key challenges in implementing this continuous testing. I know all this four sound that this all four are very relevant challenges, but let's what is the biggest challenge? Let's hear what is the biggest challenge. Whether it's integrations with different tools, hiring the right talent, implementing the right tool or the tool selection, as well as the test coverage decisions. Okay, so we are getting some answers in here. Looks like the tool selection, test coverage decision, integrations is also getting. Yeah, and there are questions around, right? How do we adopt to different tools and different processes, right? And that's what we're going to talk about, and that's what Patrick and Puneet are going to discuss in length. That what different challenges they overcame at the people, process, and tools initiative. All right. So looks like we can. We'll just give 5 more seconds for before we end the polling. All right, so let's go ahead and reveal the results. All right, so here we go, right? Rightly mentioned, right? The integrations, and that's what Patrick mentioned earlier as well, that the integration with different tools, different automation frameworks, when you have wide array of applications, as well as making the test coverage decision, right? That whether I have the right test coverage for my requirements, or the defects that I have found during this execution, whether those defect severity is right or not. Should I move ahead with that defect severity or not? And this is what we are going to discuss as well. So let's move on and ask one more thing to Patrick, right? How do you define this process as of transition from old legacy systems to new IT systems, right? And that's what some of the questions that we had, and our audience also would like to know that how this people process technology part of the continuous testing, what process did you implemented, whether it was a gradual process or incremental process, or was it a sudden change that you implemented for that transition? And how did you get the management buy-in for this entire process?
Yeah, thanks, Harshal. Yeah, what we did is of course, in the past, what we did, we had a COE, which was concerning testing. And what we did, we sit together for, say, 3 months somewhere in a cellar, and then we try to figure out, okay, what do the teams need? But we have to change that around now. And what we actually doing now, and that's also a good example that we've done with QMetry. Of course, we will do, say, a small, say, how do you call that, analysis of the current, say, capabilities that we are looking for, try to fit, say, the best tools to them, and then select, say, some teams who are willing to help us out in a POC or a pilot, so they can be used as, say, the early adopters. So instead of, and then of course, once we have selected that, then we do a couple of deep dives with, say, the vendor in that sense, or a hackathon, and then we decide, okay, is this what we need? And of course, we do that based on, say, different criteria that we have, but we also ask from the teams their criteria as well. Instead of just, say, forcing new stuff on them, we actually want to engage them and want to make them part of, say, the whole process. So we know that once we have selected a tool or a framework, we know that it will be adopted by a number of teams, and they can then be, say, our ambassadors towards, say, the rest of the organization, to help us also roll it out, and other teams can start using that. So that was our, say, or that is now our new approach, and I must say it works very nice, because not only are you then able to do nice new features to the teams, but they can also help us enhance the tool itself as well, because they also come back to us with nice requirements which we didn't thought of, and we can also negotiate that with the tool vendor as well.
Nice. So you did go with an incremental approach rather than going through the sudden approach, and that's
Yeah.
for large organization that makes sense. So Puneet, right? What challenges did you see in this whole process? And you worked hand in hand with Patrick and team. So what was Infosys' role as an IT vendor management in this entire process?
So, Harshal, what we see, if you see, ABN is a very long-standing relationship for us, and we are working very closely with Patrick and team. But when it comes to the overall scenario, we have two roles within ABN AMRO, where in one role we are working very closely with Patrick and team to make sure we work together to deliver this really cutting edge tools to make sure the teams are enabled to do the continuous testing. On the second hand, we also have a very large user base, which actually is going to be a user of these tools also. So what we saw primarily, we have for these two set of communities, two biggest challenge. One thing was how we make sure when we are bringing these changes, when we are transforming those old school tools to these new age technology tools, we still can deliver an integrated ecosystem of tools, which is not just efficient but also easy to use. So I think that was one of the challenge where we really need to work together to make sure we understand from a user point of view what could be the integration challenges, how we are going to solve them, and to be very honest, for that we have made sure there are right people from our side, but at the same time we have worked with your team, and I know you were very closely involved to make sure this integration, it's not easy, but at least it should not become more difficult than what it should be. And I think that was one of the key reason to make sure the adaptability was easy for people, because we made it very integrated ecosystem for our end users. So I think that was the first challenge where I would say we teamed up with ABN AMRO, with QMetry, and then delivered this integration of these specific tool set to the larger ecosystem. Because when you have a new tool set, how you make sure the Jira is integrated properly, if there is a script needs to be run, the things can be done directly from your old HPSV. At the same time, you can also get the results of your new scanning tools to one place. So I think all that has to be done together. And what we did, we made sure there are people rightly work for us, but we also ensured we work with other partners. So I think it is very important. It is not only about one party, but we need to work with the other partners in this ecosystem whether it is the product suppliers or it is some other IT vendors, we work together to make sure at least the integration journey becomes easier. The second part, which was maybe, also very challenging, but I think you touched at the start of this whole hackathon. And I think it was, some of the also idea coming from Patrick and then some of the other colleagues, where we really made sure we do this and increase the adaptability, or let's say acceptance, more than adaptability, acceptance towards the user group. But that was not the only thing. We also wanted to get a fair feedback, because before we start the implementation, we really wanted to understand what are the impediments which will really be bothering to our end users. And then we made sure we really list them down, work with you, but also work with some of the other suppliers to make sure those are being delivered as our users are expecting. So that is one part. The second part, where I think, we are not bringing new people to the teams. So it is not like when we start bringing a new tool, we replace our existing 100 testers of HP knowledge with, let's say, 100 new testers with the QMetry knowledge. So I think that's where what we have made sure the larger test community of Infosys is really trained, and they really get exposure to the tools. We created the playgrounds, we made arranged a lot of testing with the help of yours, but also some of the other tools, so the team feel comfortable while they are going to use this tool for the first time. So I think those were the two things where we faced the maximum challenge. And I would say, we worked in this specific case with you very closely to enable the teams, but also to integrate this seamlessly with our larger ecosystem.
Yeah. No, I remember the first day when we talked about with Patrick, right? We talked about this whole incremental approach rather than going big bang with the implementation of the tool. And I think that has worked out very well for the entire team. So now let's quickly ask our audience, right? What was the approach that they have adopted for this continuous testing implementation? Has it been incremental or has it been big bang? I'm going to replace all the tools, I'm going to replace all the people, and I'm going to just get everything new? Or has it been an incremental approach where you have decided to go with changing the processes, changing the tools, and then adopting or giving your people enough time to adopt to those new tools and technologies? All right. Looks like there are not a lot Big Bang Theory enthusiasts over here. We have a lot of people who have adopted the incremental approach, and that works best when you have an enterprise kind of setup, right? When it's a more kind of a smaller setup or a startup setup, a Big Bang methodology will always work. All right, so in the interest of time, we'll just close this survey right here and then publish it. All right, so as we said, right, incremental approach, which Patrick, Puneet also mentioned, is the right way to go with when you are implementing continuous testing. Now, moving forward, right, so Patrick, the biggest challenge in this whole process is getting people on board or getting the management on board, right? So what were the few of the challenges that you encountered during this process of getting people on board, getting the processes, as well as the whole cultural and organizational shift?
Yeah, indeed. I can tell you one example that also depicts, say, the next slide. That when we started, for instance, with test data management to also support continuous testing from a test data management point of view, we came up with, say, a new idea about how we can integrate, say, test data management in, say, the CI/CD pipelines, and also how we should do our, say, data refreshes for environments which are in need of, say, fresh test data. So we came up with, say, a revolutionary, how do you call it? revolutionized idea. And first, when people saw that, they just ignored us because they say, yeah, I can do this by myself and I don't need you. Once we came back to them, because we also knew that we have to improve, we came up with some new features in that solution, and then they start laughing at us because what you're now suggesting is rubbish. We are not going to use it because we are used to do it in our own way. So please leave us alone and don't bother us. Once we have also the buy-in from our stakeholders, and especially from the higher management, who also saw that this is the way forward, then we started with, say, the implementation. And we indeed, we again started very small with, say, a couple of teams and see if that works, yes or no, especially on, say, the test data selection, creation, and masking of data. And people then start fighting you because they think, okay, normally I do this by myself, but now I have to hand over my work to other people, and can they be trusted, and do they do the same job as me? So there was a lot of fighting, but at the end, that's the last sentence. If you are persuasive enough and you show some endurance, and you can also use, say, the early adapters as, say, ambassadors, then at the end, everybody say, okay, yeah, this is going to work. So at the end, we won, and we implemented test data management, also from a continuous testing point of view within all ABN AMRO. And it is now a widely spread, say, solution and services that we are providing. So that's how we, but at the end, of course, it's all about convincing, say, the right stakeholders and management. So you have to have the right buy-in from your managers. That is one thing. But also make sure that the teams are also aware of what you're doing, and tell them what you are doing and how you're going to do it, and engage them and involve them in the whole process. So that helps very well.
Yeah, no, definitely. And a great quote, right? You rightly quoted so Mahatma Gandhi in this entire process. So now moving on, right? We talked about the processes, we talked about the people, but the tools, as you all mentioned, right? Both Patrick and Puneet. I know you have created a framework, you have created a checklist of tools during your evaluation criteria, and our audience would love to understand that. What was the checklist, right? What was the key pointers as part of that checklist, so that when they are doing this whole transformation activity, it enables or helps them in terms of getting there for the tools perspective.
Yeah. Shall I continue first, Puneet, or do you want to start?
You, Patrick, please go ahead.
Okay. And also talking about tools, what we looked for at the beginning is, of course, what kind of capabilities do the teams need, and based on that, we will look at tools, and based on that list of tools, of course, you must understand that within ABN AMRO, we are moving away from all the platforms that we're currently supporting to only two, which is Azure and Azure DevOps and the mainframe. So that also gives us already a short list in tools who are capable of integrating those tools in those pipelines for those technologies and those platforms. So of course, if you look at, say, the real, say, functional and non-functional testing, it should be able to integrate in, say, Azure DevOps to make it part of the pipelines. The other is also, as much as possible, use containers, because that can also give us the opportunities to spin up and spin down, say, test agents or VMs on, say, Azure in that sense. It also has to integrate with different, say, metrics tools like Splunk or AppDynamics to make sure that you can perform, say, the shift left, but also the shift right. So make sure that you can have, say, the reporting back from say, production towards your development and testing. And also, what was the other one? Make sure that they're also capable of doing some sort of AI. So if you look at, say, test tools, can they adapt to, say, an AI way of working? So automatically check for code quality, but also predictive analysis by looking at test cases. Are they double? Is there, say, overlap in tools and all that kind of stuff? So although it's a very short list, but it can be a very long list, of course. But those are the main, say, drivers, I would say. And of course, if you look at, say, licensed tools, of course, the money is also important, but that is not a primary driver for us. As long as it caters the needs of the teams as well, we will go for that tool. So that's more or less, what I can say about that. Like I said, the list can be very long because it also depends on what kind of technologies are we going to use. So what kind of databases do you need to support? What kind of language? What kind of protocols? And all that kind of stuff. But I assume that everybody understands that those are the normal, say, KPIs or the normal requirements that you ask for a tool.
No, definitely. And Puneet, would you like to add something on that?
Yeah, so I would just say I think Patrick has covered mostly. The only from my side, I would really advise, if people are looking for this change, I would say don't look at others' checklist. Maybe the checklist would definitely be pretty much depend on each enterprise. So you have to define a boundary looking at, what is your strategy, whether you really want to go best of breed or you want to go best of suite. I think a lot of people have mentioned integration or seen integration as the biggest challenge. I think you really need to consider that in your framework. If I'm going to go with some tool selections, how I'm really going to facilitate this whole integration and build the ecosystem. So I think that is, let's say, the broader boundary, Harshal, what I would recommend people to choose. And from that point onwards, I think the two things are very, very important: the ease of use and adaptability. And it is very important, you do it one after the other. So it is not like, you don't look at the best of breed or best of suite strategy and directly jump on the ease of use, because sometimes if you have chosen one of these approaches, maybe you might need to compromise a little bit on the other part, but then at least you have defined the boundaries for your users. And definitely we need to work on to make sure they can really find it good to use and easy to use. But those are, let's say, my view. When you really go for two selections, you should adapt.
Sure. No, that makes sense. And you are right? You cannot have a standard checklist that will fit for all, and there has to be, you have to modify to your needs, right? Now, let's ask this last question to our audience, right? Before we summarize today's discussion and open it for Q&A. Which are the most important criteria for your team when you're selecting a tool, right? Whether it's a SaaS-based solution, it has to be a security or agile and DevOps ready, seamless integrations, scalability. I know all these 5 are most important, but from the priority perspective, which would you prioritize higher when you are looking at a continuous testing ecosystem? Right, so we are getting some answers in here. Definitely agile and DevOps ready is getting a lot of love, and right next to is seamless integration. And looks like again, security is a very important aspect of quality, but when you're talking about continuous testing, I think security, it gets baked in as part of that whole entire process. All right, so I think we'll give a couple of more seconds before we close this poll. All right. I think we are good to go, and let's go ahead and close the poll. And looks like, as I said, right, agile and DevOps readiness of a tool is very important when you are looking at the continuous testing, alongside with seamless integration, which is rightly so. And it does not have to be SaaS based or cloud based. It can be on-prem. So, all right, this is a good summarization. Now, quickly, I'll go to the success parameters. I don't want to spend a lot of time there because I know there are a lot of KPIs and there are a lot of say time to market, total cost of ownership, and all those KPIs involved. And Patrick and Puneet, you can just quickly give us an overview that what were some of the KPIs defined by your organization to define the outcome of this whole continuous testing initiative.
Yeah, as you can understand, while moving towards, say, a new platform, collecting those KPIs can be a challenge. So what we do within ABN AMRO is, of course, look at the velocity of the teams. Are they able to deliver faster? And we specifically let that be a responsibility of the teams to tell us, okay, how successful are you? Or are you missing something within your process? Because me as a product owner of the test tooling team, I'm a central team and I do not work within, say, a team. We make services available for those teams. But we are working on, say, getting those metrics also from our repositories. But that is not yet in place because that is a tedious task to actually define, okay, how can I measure exactly how the teams are performing and what are they using and how does it contribute, say, to, at the end, say, the business value and also to our customers. But yeah, like I said, we are using our teams' velocity overviews to see, okay, do we see a shift there? And also, if we know, okay, they have adopted now to, say, the new way of working while using continuous testing, you should see the velocity go up.
Sure, makes sense. Anything you have to add, Puneet?
No, I think this is the most important thing. Even if I see not only just ABN but also other enterprises, they really look for the time to market, which is very key. And if that's been addressed, I think that is one of the most important thing which business is really looking forward. And from the IT point of view, if you really make sure you can continue to deliver as per the promise in sprints, so which I think Patrick already covered on the velocity point. I think those are the two things which are measurable. I think there are a lot of other things which are the side effects of this, but I think these are the two things which are really measurable and where we see a lot of focus from the business and IT both sides.
Sure. No, thank you. So let's quickly summarize the key takeaways from today's discussion, right? The first and foremost is that continuous testing is the driver for delivering this high quality software. And as Puneet and Patrick mentioned, the time to market is very essential, and that's where that is most important for the success of digital transformation, right? The next is for right processes, right? Most important is you need to have this right set of tools that allows the interoperability and increases the team collaboration. So that's the process part of it. And then comes the organizational shift or the cultural shift, where we talk about the people mindset change, getting the buy-in from the stakeholders, getting the people skill set leveled off as part of the and getting accountability of the entire team for the product quality. And without right tools, the continuous testing and hence the digital transformation cannot be achieved in a right fashion or right manner, right? So in order to implement the digital transformation and continuous testing, the entire people, process, tools, technology combination needs to come together. And that's where I think QMetry with its combination of tools and technologies and ease of use, adaptability makes a lot of difference while achieving this whole continuous testing process, right? And I think I personally have seen a lot of organizations migrating out of legacy tools and adopting to QMetry kind of tools to get that seamless integration, to get that shift from conventional methodologies to newer methodologies. All right. So with that, I think we have 10 minutes. So I'll keep the floor open for any Q&A from our audience. All right. Looks like we have our first question. Patrick, you did mention, right, that as part of the COE, there was this whole shift on continuous testing. So the question we have here is, what are the main category you, as a COE, you need to define for continuous testing transformation?
And where is the question? Because I cannot see it. And what is meant by the main category?
Yeah, so there are, whether it's a people, process, or tool, what do you think is the most important part as part of this whole continuous testing?
Well, adaptation, I think, by the teams and collaboration with the teams. I think that is the most important category while doing this transformation. Because, from a COE point of view, like I mentioned, you cannot do it all by yourself, although we were used to do that, but we want to engage our internal customers to make sure that we build the right stuff and implement the right stuff.
Sure, makes sense. The next question is for you, Puneet, right? You did mention that you have your team members enabled on different tools, but how did you do the skill assessment with your QA teams?
Sure. So I think, see, that way, maybe if you see, we as Infosys, we are very much focusing on this whole learnability. So we have a education and research department where, we have a complete assessment framework where people really have to go through the test, but not only just the books or let's say the theory, but also do some real hands-on to make sure we can assess them. And we also ensure in terms of some of these learnings are being made as a part of their personal development plan, so that if they attain one level, that goes to the next level. And that was, let's say, has worked really well for us. And to be very honest, we see when we implemented QMetry, those trainings were really helpful, and the environment or the playground which we have created, that also helped teams to make it faster and better for them. And the same we are adapting now when we are going through some of the agile and DevOps transformation with other clients. I think this whole framework of learnability which we have is really very good. We have also rolled out a online learning platform for all our employees. And to be very honest, I'm very happy to share. Initially, we thought people would be spending, let's say, around 20 to 30 minutes in a week. But what we see, it is more than 30 minutes which people are spending every day. So that also gives a feeling in terms of how important it is for the development community to learn and to get into a continuous learning process.
Sure, makes sense. So this is a question for you, Patrick, right? And the question is like, how has QMetry helped you in this whole transition of continuous testing, right? In terms of achieving some of the outcomes?
Yeah, so we used to use HPLM for our test management purposes. So storing, say, test results, test cases, test scenarios. But to integrate that in the workflow with Jira was impossible, or it was a very tedious task. So that's why we looked at an alternative. Besides that, we also stopped the contract for HPLM. So we also needed to look for another tool. So one of the reasons was also that it should be integrated within say, our workflow as well. So after looking at, say, other tools as well, QMetry came out as the candidate where we had that hackathon with. So easy integration with, say, our workflow of Jira. So we use, say, test goals as a requirement, so they can easily be integrated and synced up with, say, QMetry. So all your, say, user stories, corresponding test cases, test results, and test scenarios are also traceable, because that was also one of our biggest requirement. So that and in QMetry that is possible to make sure that whole traceability flow is also available. So with one press on the button, you can actually see, okay, what is the status of my my tests, and can I relate it back to, say, a user story, and at the end also to the code that I've used. So because that is also one of our controls for compliancy and reasons.
Sure, that makes sense. I think there's one more question, follow-up for that. That has this whole process of continuous testing helped in testing data for database as well as data warehousing?
No, that is. I assume that is a question for me.
Of course, you are the test data management expert.
Well, test data management is used for a variety of databases, of course. Our tool, which we are using, is Broadcom Test Data Manager, formerly known as CA Test Data Manager, and before that, Grid Tools. So it can cater a lot of, say, different database types. Well, the list is too long to mention it now, but it can help us, and it is helping us throughout the whole organization.
Okay,
Is
nice,
that
nice.
the right answer to the question? Or?
Yes, I think so.
Okay.
So I think we'll take this one last question, right? And Puneet, this comes for you, right? When you encounter with such initiatives for these large organizations, right? What kind of framework you go in with to help your customers out?
And then you mean in terms of tool selection or the overall transformation, or?
The overall transformation, the whole continuous testing, right? The people, process, and tech and tools.
Yeah. So I think it is very important we make the all these blocks, people, process, and the tool, and we place them next to each other, where we really work with them to find out the tool selection based on what I just mentioned, best of breed or best of suite. If you see, like for ABN AMRO, we have chosen best of breed. And once you decide that, you can also move forward in terms of how do you really make the other things work. The second part, which is very, very important. So if you have the best of the tools, but your current test processes doesn't support them or doesn't help you making the right use of those tools, then also it is not going to be very efficient. So the second part, what we do, we really look at the processes which are being used, and then we make sure at least those processes are aligned or enabled to make the usage of these tools in the right way. So that is the second part. And the third part, definitely, when we are bringing, let's say, a tool and process, we make sure there is right enablement done for the teams which are going to use there. So I think those are the three things which are very important for anybody to use. There can be very detailed parameters for each one of them, but I would say you should make sure you consider these three aspects and then start detailing out if you want to be a successful you want to do a successful transformation in terms of the continuous testing, at least.
Sure, thank you. And I think we have reached the top of the hour, and I'll take this last question. where it says QMetry is your enterprise test management tool. Yes, QMetry is our enterprise test management tool, which integrates with your Agile and DevOps tools as well. All right, so thank you everyone for joining again today. I hope this was an informative session and helpful session. If there is any follow-up questions for us, for our esteemed guest Patrick or Puneet, or for myself, then please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you again. Have a great day.
Thank you all so much.
Thanks, Harshal. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.
And that will end our event for today. So I would like to thank our speakers, Harshal, Patrick, and Puneet for their time, and QMetry for sponsoring this web seminar. And of course, thanks to all of you in the audience for spending this hour with us today and giving us all these great questions and interactions. So everybody have a great day, and we hope to see you at a future event. Thanks, everybody.